From January to May this year, I traveled in Morocco, Portugal, and Spain, where I lived for around 2 euros a day. And if I was lucky, I showered once every 2 weeks. I don't think it's an over-exaggeration to say that I ate canned chickpeas for 70% of my meals, which I, by the way, still love just as much. But what this travel really was about was that I slowly learned to quiet my mind from all the noise that really was there, and slowly I started to feel again. First, if you have never backpacked, then you should go right now. Just pack your stuff and go. First, maybe get a backpack. But seriously, backpacking is this feeling of having your home pretty much on you. You feel so unattached, so independent, and when it comes down to it, pretty much you just feel free. And yeah, this is something I really want everyone to try for their sake because it's amazing. You know, I think there are a lot of people who want to travel but don't because they think that their money is limiting their ability to travel and to have a travel that really helps them grow. You know, there are these standard backpacking trips which I've also been on, and that's another thing that I want to do in this video, just kind of compare that kind of trip to this trip. Also, I will share my my spiritual experience in relation to this trip and how this trip really affected me on a spiritual way, and I wasn't even aware of that until I got back home. So first, I'll try to make it super short background of how and why I ended up traveling like this. So I dropped out of university. I've talked about this on my Instagram, and I feel like it'll be super long if I talk about it now, so you can go there if you're more interested. I dropped out of university. I knew I needed to go travel. Portugal started popping up in my head. I didn't know why. I bought a one-way ticket there with no plans other than I had booked a yoga retreat for the first week, and I did not know why I was going to Portugal, but I felt like I was going there for a reason. And so the yoga retreat ended and I had no plans at all, and I tried to surrender even though it was hard, and I sat down and I didn't know what to do. I ended up booking myself a night at a hostel. Initially, what I wanted to do was travel and just live in a tent and a sleeping bag, but being a woman, it sounds so mature to say woman, and a girl sounds so young, whatever, being me, I didn't know if it was safe, or yeah, I had my skeptic thoughts about traveling like this in a tent and sleeping bag. So I kind of compromised and said, okay, I'll sleep at hostels, but then during the day I'll take trips to to nature. Long story short, the first night I ended up talking with a person and we clicked right away. We just felt this connection and ended up talking like from early in the evening to 2 a.m. and I found out that he was traveling for a year. He was living in a tent, or in a hammock at that time, in the woods, and this was actually his only night where he was staying at a hostel because his friend was at this hostel. After talking for, I think it was 2 minutes, I asked if I could join him. You know when you just know, and I just felt this amazing connection. And he was the reason why I was able to travel like that. So yeah, that was why I had to go to Portugal. That is the long story short, which wasn't as short as I wanted it to be. Alright, so a normal backpacking trip as I see it, this definition, by the way, is just my experience for the sake of this video. So when I say normal backpacking trip, I mean the type of backpacking trip where, yeah, obviously you bring a backpack with you. You sleep at hostels, sometimes hotels. You spend money on food, go out eating, a lot of drinking. Maybe not a lot of drinking, but there's definitely like partying involved, and you spend money on tourist trips, or just, yeah, trips, tourist attractions. What else? Yeah, so that's just that. So the first biggest difference. One, in the normal backpacking, you spend or you stay in big cities or just cities. I stayed away from cities. Like, it was as far away from cities as possible, pretty much. Number two, in the normal backpacking, you sleep in a hostel. You spend money in a hostel. On my trip, I slept in a tent, in a sleeping bag, or preferably actually under open sky, but yeah, not in a hostel. Number three, you will meet a lot more people in the normal backpacking trip, where on my trip we didn't really meet that many people. I mean, the people we met were locals, and yeah, so not a lot of young people your age from other countries. You'll get to shower in a normal backpacking trip. Pretty much, you don't really get to shower. Like, showers are amazing, but they're overrated. We don't need to shower as much as we do. Number 6, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, number 6, party vibe, non-party vibe. That's, yeah, no need to comment further on that one. On this one, at least from my experiences, you eat a lot of food out at restaurants. Like, you want to try local restaurants and you eat all this amazing food. This way of traveling, or at least the way we chose to do it, you buy really freaking cheap food. Food is a big point. We went to restaurants, I think, once or twice, and it was only because it was super cheap. You don't go to cafes, you don't buy the luxury food that you normally do. You buy canned food and the cheapest vegetables. We also did some dumpster diving, not as much as we wanted to, because sometimes it was like the dumpsters were locked away, but we did some. Wherever we were, we ate the food that was in season. Like, when we were in Portugal in January, we ate a lot of clementines, and in Spain, I think it was in February or March, we ate almonds. Like, there were almond trees right where we were camping. At one point of our trip, I think we went 4 days without paying for any food. Like, we got picked up by people who invited us to their home and gave us food, and we found food, like random places that people had left that we ate, or we just, yeah, ate the dates on the date trees in Morocco. And yeah, I think it was seriously 4 days where we didn't spend any money at all. So, yeah. Normal backpacking is, you do a lot of tourist trips. On this one, we pretty much did it ourselves. Like, in Morocco, people spent money on, yeah, trips to the desert. We just walked into the desert by ourselves and got a desert trip as well. A lot of fun, and a lot of more unexpected experiences. Pretty much this type of traveling, you see completely different parts of a country than with this normal backpacking trip, or just generally like normal tourist trips. Because you aren't placed in the center of cities, the locals that you meet aren't interested in selling stuff to you, so you meet them with, or they meet you with a completely different attitude. This was definitely one of the things that I really enjoyed as a contrast to my normal trips. Also, because you're not sleeping at a hostel, you actually get really good sleep. Like, at a hostel, when you're sleeping in a dorm with, like, I don't know, up to how many like 12 people sleeping in one room is the worst I've tried. You don't get that much sleep because people come home from parties at different times. I mean, unless you're a really heavy sleeper, then awesome, but for me, I'm like the other extreme. I'm a super light sleeper. Like, there'll be people snoring, people turning on lights at 3 a.m. because they don't really think about the fact that there are other people in the room, or, you know, just stuff like that, which is also part of the package, and I'm sure fun experiences. But when you travel like we did, seriously, it's just sounds of nature, animals, the wind, and that's it. And at least for me, like, I definitely prefer sleeping in a tent, which is free, and your sleep is much better. Also, it's super awesome when your sleep cycle, or yeah, when your body starts adjusting to the natural cycle. Like, you just start getting tired when the sun goes down and waking up by yourself when the sun rises, and you feel rested. Oh yeah, I forgot, transportation. A lot of the time when I was backpacking the normal way, again, this is just generalizing, like, I know this is not for everyone, but transportation, you spend money on, yeah, public transportation or whatever, you spend money, like trains, buses. This way we hitchhiked. The only time we took a taxi was when we were sick in the desert, stuck in the desert, and we needed to get out. But yeah, hitchhiking. Hitchhiking is amazing. And there's so many misconceptions and misunderstood ideas about hitchhiking. Seriously, go out hitchhiking tomorrow or whenever. You can do it at home. It doesn't have to be when you're traveling. And the last final point, you spend a lot less money traveling like this. We narrowed it down to on average €2 a day. Yeah. I feel like one of the most misunderstood things about traveling is that you need a lot of money to get a really great trip and to grow a lot, and you don't. Like, yes, normal backpacking is definitely a lot cheaper than a lot of other ways of traveling, but you can do it even cheaper, and this normal backpacking actually ends up costing a lot of money. I did it myself and just from other people's experiences, and I know people do it in a different way, but there is still a tendency. You don't need that much money to travel. Of course, I know that some people, like if you're living in Europe and you want to go to Hawaii, for example, you need a plane ticket there, and that costs money. But if you are in a situation where you don't really care where you go, you just know that you have to go out and travel, then hitchhike. Like, just start hitchhiking and then go. Get a tent, get a sleeping bag, sleep outside, bam. You save at least €20 a day. I mean, some hostels are more expensive than that. Seriously, not paying for a hostel is so worth it. Also, all the things that we think we need, like, of course, if you want to go out and buy a lot of stuff on these trips, then yes, you'll need money, but if you want to travel cheaply, just don't buy all the unnecessary stuff. Like, don't buy jewelry, don't buy clothes, don't buy touristy things. We didn't even buy toilet paper once. Every time we went to a public toilet, we would just take a roll of toilet paper, and that lasted usually enough time before we needed another one, but there were times where we didn't have toilet paper, and through this we learned which leaves were the best as replacement of toilet paper. They're the ones with a little bit of hair on, so they create resistance, you know. Along with the money question, another big question that is asked a lot is, what did you guys do on this trip? Like, if you're not in the cities, you're just stuck in somewhere in the mountains or in the woods, what did you spend your time doing? And the answer is quite simple. We didn't really do much. Well, of course that needs explanation, but I spent a lot of time just being, which in normal definition would be doing nothing, but really I did so much more reflecting and thinking, inwards thinking and inwards looking than I had been able to do for so long. Like, we would spend hours just sitting and listening to the wind or staring up at the sky. And in the beginning I was super restless, but this was also through this process that I realized how much I always needed to be doing something, which I found out was preventing me from feeling a lot of things that had to come up. A lot of emotions came up like this. Like, a lot of insecurities, a lot of fears, a lot of sadness that had been suppressed. Like, we did things that I would never have pictured myself doing. Like, we spent hours climbing date trees or finding a method to get the dates down from the trees, like throwing rocks at them, and we climbed nectarine trees, or not nectarines, mandarin trees, and made chess games and played chess, and yeah, things like that. When you just sit and you just are, you get to reflect on a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff starts coming up. I'm not going to talk about all the insecurities that I looked at again, because I feel like that's a bit boring, but one of them was that I had been struggling with disordered eating, from very extremely restrictive eating to just very controlled eating, and needing to exercise. Exercise was not something I enjoyed. It was something I did because, yeah, out of fear of becoming fat. And binge eating had been a part of it, and all this, and I had actually convinced myself somehow that, you know, nothing was wrong. Like, if I had had any problem with eating, I was over it. But I wasn't. And this trip, I I would say that I healed my eating disorder. Or I don't like calling it an eating disorder because it comes like another label. But I mean, all words are labels. I prefer to say that I had a disordered way of eating. Like, I overcame that on this trip. If you've had a disordered way of eating or an eating disorder, you know that thoughts that have been there for so long don't just vanish. So sometimes the thoughts still come up, but now I'm able to deal with them and not let them control me, and that is so, so liberating. Because we were living so minimalistically, like, I cut out all the things that I had weighed as so important back home, like makeup or having to wear a different outfit every day. I had 2 shirts that I wore for those 5 months, and it was so liberating not to have to think about what to put on and having to wear the perfect outfit. You know, there were so many things that I've been holding on to that I realized were just things that I've been fighting to hold on to because that was what shaped my identity. Because I was letting my identity and self-worth be judged by others and outer sources. I mean, this is not anyone else's fault but my own. But on this trip, I just realized how extreme it had been. And slowly, when all this was taken off layer by layer, I mean, there was a lot, I slowly started to feel that inside. And I think it was the first time in many, many years since I was a child that the true me came up, really. I mean, of course, I've seen glimpses of it. You know, from letting my self-worth be so dependent on other people's opinions, and by having to wear the perfect outfit or look perfect, all this stuff, I was indirectly telling myself, Emma, you're not good enough, like, in your natural way, which was just lowering my self-worth even more. So it was like I had been caught in this horrible cycle, and I think a lot of young people especially are, not just young people, I mean, I know many adults where I think, you guys are amazing souls, and right now you're depleting your souls, and yeah. So that was, realizing this was really, really big, and also really hard, because once you remove all those layers that you've been holding on to as your identity, you feel extremely naked. Like, who am I if I'm not this? You know, when I left on this trip, I was just kind of like, I don't want to have to do anything. This is all about just being in the now. And when I started traveling with the guy who's living in a tent, it just seemed more like an effort for me to meditate every morning. I mean, of course, I've realized now afterwards that meditation is so much more than what I thought it was, and that I actually was meditating. But at the time, I was so focused on my guided meditations, and, you know, we didn't have internet and all that, so in my mind I was taking a break and slowing down my spiritual process, and I was like, okay, whatever, that's fine, I'll get back to it when I get back home. And I wasn't aware while I was there that this act of just being in nature and just, yeah, being in the now was a huge, huge factor for my personal growth, and in that regard also my spiritual growth. Just being made me so much more connected with nature, and this was the first time, well, I've experienced it as a kid a lot, but I guess forgotten it. So since I was a child, this was the first time I really felt this sometimes connectedness with nature, and that feeling of feeling so small, but at the same time so, like, so empowered. There would be nights where I was awake. Well, I would be awake at 4 a.m. and, like, the wind was just so intense and the trees were rustling. And yeah, it was, yeah. This trip made me extremely connected with nature, and that was, I see that as a very big factor of my spiritual growth. Coming back, I realized I wasn't slowing down my growth. I was exactly where I was. I mean, I had been guided to be exactly where I needed to be, and I needed to look at all these insecurities, and there were things that I needed to overcome, and fears that I needed to feel, and I needed to just be in an environment where I wasn't so focused on all the things that I needed to do, you know. I've always been so focused on to-do lists, like do this, do that, like get it done, all these things. And now there was just nothing to do, and I needed to be able to embrace that. It's all about what you want. If you like partying, and if you want to meet a lot of other young travelers, then of course, like, this kind of trip will be super lonely and just not for you. So again, like anything else, there's no one way for everyone, but I'm just sharing what, yeah, from my point of view and from my experience. I do have an encouragement though, and that is to dare to be brave and to face your fears. Like, I used to be a person who needed plans and control, and I wasn't aware that this was just a reflection of how powerless I felt to circumstances and events that were happening in the outer world that I wanted to control. I wasn't aware that I could control my own feelings and reactions to them, so I wanted to control the events themselves. But this trip, I realized, by not having a plan, I seriously realized that things always work out. Like, there were nights where we didn't have a place to sleep. We were, like, one night we were stuck. We got dropped off by the people who had picked us up in their car when we were hitchhiking, and it was dark. We didn't have anywhere to sleep, and we were too close to the city, and it was just not optimal to put up a tent, so we walked and we found this tunnel under a train track, and there was, like, human shit in the tunnel, and we had to move that. And we were going to sleep there, and then all of a sudden this flashlight is shining on us, and I got so scared. And this man and his son invited us into their house. It wasn't even a house. This was the craziest experience for me on this trip. Well, not the craziest, it was the most touching experience. And they invited us into they had a little, like, cement wall, pretty much. There was barely a roof, I don't remember. Yeah, there was like a roof, no door, no windows. They only had a mattress each, and they took us into their little room, and they had a spare room, and they broomed it for us, and we're standing there with all our stuff, and they're giving us tea and water. And the dad, he took one of his mattresses from where he was sleeping and put it so I could sleep on it, and they had nothing, these people. Like, I'm getting so emotional because I spent, like, so many hours that night just crying because I felt so ungrateful. I had so much more than them, and here they are just brushing the floor and giving me his mattress so I could sleep on it, and doing it from the bottom of their heart, not because they expected anything from us. And in the morning they gave us, like, eggs from their chickens and tea, and, you know, they gave us everything that they could offer. And seriously, my point in saying this is, well, back to what I was saying, everything works out, but two, these kinds of experiences do not happen when you plan everything, but when you open up your heart and trust that everything works out, beautiful, unexpected things like this happen. And experiences like this are the ones that shake your core and change your beliefs or move you as a person, and that's what we grow from. And I would not have been without any of these experiences. If you feel like you're stuck in your life, or if nothing really feeds your soul, if you don't truly become happy, or if you feel like you just don't have purpose, seriously, I advise you to travel in this way. It's so cheap. Almost everyone can do it. It requires a backpack. If you don't have enough money to buy a backpack, seriously, you can buy mine. Like, I'm not even kidding. If you feel desperate, like, write to me. I cannot emphasize how important this trip was for me on that note. Like, I realized how stuck I was in this consumeristic cycle with a delusionary subconscious belief that things things in the outer world would make me happy. And you can't change that belief until you try what it's like not having all these things, and until you experience this true happiness from not having these things. Because a lot of us are stuck in this cycle, and that's not, there's no one to blame for that. That's just because we're living in the society that we are. And a lot of us aren't aware of it, that we are stuck in this cycle. I wasn't, at least. I could talk so much more about traveling. Like, I have an entire notebook. Actually, I have 1.5 notebook filled up with experiences and thoughts and reflections, and yeah, experiences that I really want to share, actually, but I've made it short, and I might make another traveling video. I don't know if people are interested in that, but yeah. I hope this video was inspiring, and if you're sitting there and you don't have a lot of money but you feel like you need to travel, you can. I would love to help someone if you need more advice. Yeah, I think that's it for this video. I will see you in my next video. Thank you for watching. Give yourself the gift of just letting your mind get quiet, listening to your surroundings, and just being. This simple act can change your life. At least it did for me.